Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, oil, but in a place you'd not usually think of. We're looking at Puntland, one of the poorest regions in Africa. But could oil change all that? We talked to one of the men who's drilling for black gold. All that plus an interview with the World Bank on its latest growth forecasts, and surprise, surprise, they're not good. But we want to start in a region of Africa which is hoping to see just how transformational and powerful natural resources can be to a struggling economy. We're talking Puntland and we're talking oil. It might just be that this autonomous region of northern Somalia has found the source of its own renewal, or potentially a curse, as such riches can often be. What's for sure is that for the first time in 20 years, companies are drilling for oil in Puntland. Here it is on the map, Puntland, in the Horn of Africa, and specifically two large blocks of oil there called the Dahrua Valley and Nogal Valley blocks. They are sizable, 36,000 square kilometers combined, which is around the size of the island of Taiwan, and beneath the ground, an estimated 19 billion barrels of oil. Now, not all of it is recoverable, but remember, oil's easily over $100 a barrel, so a basic calculation gives us a potential $2 trillion to be made. Compare that to the size of the Puntland economy on its own, just $5.9 billion in 2010, with a meager average income per capita of just $600. Now, just to put the region in some context, Puntland's been a semi-autonomous region in Somalia since 1998. It was formed in response to the collapse of the government and the ongoing civil war in the south. It has been calm recently compared to the lawless south, but illegal fishing, dumping and piracy along the coast are a barrier to progress. Though you might remember from last week's Counting the Cost, we did report on how piracy money had in fact helped the region, which has lit some point. And we visit the London High Street store where you can walk in the way of infrastructure or industry. Oil, though, could offer the real jobs and revenue the region does desperately need. Now, one of the companies drilling for oil is Australia's Range Resources. And we've got its Executive Director, Peter Landau, joining us from Perth in Western Australia this week. Peter, thank you for your time. I would like, if I could, a brief history lesson actually to start with. This is the first drilling in Puntland in 20 years. What has happened in those 20 years? Was it just too dangerous? Did companies have to get out 20 years ago? Tell me the backstory.
Sure. I mean, I think it's, I think most from Westerners can appreciate. I think Black Hawk Down is probably the one incident that people remember, which led to an end to sort of like the federal Somalia as was known in the in the 70s and 80s. So with that and the removal of obviously from Westerners can appreciate. I think Black Hawk Down is probably the one incident that people remember, which led to an end to sort of like the federal Somalia as was known in the in the 70s and 80s. So with that and the removal of obviously the UN and all the Western forces from Somalia, basically the country was split in three. You had Somaliland basically going back to its traditional tribal origins and being autonomous rule. Obviously Puntland similarly became autonomous, and then you had Mogadishu, which was always a little bit more complicated with the added influx of warlords in the earlier years and the Islamic fundamentalists in the later years. So from Puntland's perspective, it really, I mean, the former President Hersey started the search for partners in the oil and gas and mineral industry at around 2002, and for the first 3 or 4 years did not have much luck, because stability-wise it was an unknown commodity. Not only that, you still did have a transitional federal government in southern Somalia, so there was confusion as to actually who had the legitimate rights to minerals and hydrocarbons in the area. And I know it's I'm trying not to be facetious, but piracy has actually done Puntland from a perception point of view, where it has done it a lot of credibility and a lot of positiveness in that you have Western governments and the EU and the UN dealing with the Puntland government and recognising that this is a responsible government, and it can be dealt with as the legitimate ruler of Puntland.
And so you get to this drilling stage now, the pointy end of things, if you like, but you as a company have been there for 7 years already. With all the research and testing you've no doubt done in that time, how confident are you about the real oil prospects here? We know there's a lot. Tell me about short and long term, and really how much you can get out of this.
Well, I mean, we're incredibly confident, and I think, again, sorry for going back to an historical lesson, but originally when the Hunt brothers found oil in Yemen in the early 80s, everyone started looking at their geological field maps, and what was established is that the two producing basins in Yemen, which I think to date have produced anywhere from 3 to 4 billion barrels, are replicated geologically in Puntland. So the Nugal and Daror Valley are geological replicas, if you'd like, mirror images of what we found, what was found in Yemen. Very few people have ever doubted the significance of a hydrocarbon basin in Puntland in those two basins, and obviously we're very hopeful that the discoveries will be made sooner rather than later.
Peter, let's talk about the business itself. As I'm sure you're all too aware of, oil companies, wherever they go, whatever they do, they will inevitably come under the spotlight or be accused of coming in and taking the money and running. What is Range doing to make sure that you do give back adequately to the Puntland region?
Okay, I mean, it's a very good question. I think it all started from day one, both in terms of not only with the PSA, or we originally had a contract of work terms, as well as which provided for monthly payments to the government, direct to the government for, well, since we've been there, monthly payments have been made, which have gone into infrastructure predominantly. I mean, that is always a standard in terms of government payments, instead of upfront payments, which you'll find with sign-on bonuses in Angola, Nigeria. Our sign-on bonuses were monthly originally, and now moving into the